So as this is a good starting place, let me just introduce this webinar. I'm Linda Elder with the Foundation for Critical Thinking. This is April the 4th, 2023. And we're focused on how your egocentricity affects you and others. Jim, thank you for your comments, and I'll leave time at the end for any further comments, questions, anything related or unrelated to the webinar for anyone who would like to stay for a few minutes. So we are focused on one concept with many that contains many concepts within the conceptual map of critical thinking. So we're focused on the concept of egocentricity, and we need to understand it in connection with the other primary concepts in a rich conception of critical thinking. So I'll situate the concept of egocentricity a bit for us as we move forward. So I'm delighted so many of you are joining us. Obviously, you wouldn't be here if you thought that your egocentric thinking did not sometimes affect you, or that you weren't affected by someone else's. So we get intuitively, if you will, the concept of egocentricity in the way that it's being used, as in, I am the center of the universe type thinking. And this way of thinking about egocentric thinking is now in, as it were, common use. But we need to dig deeper to understand what it is really doing in the mind.
A long time where it's like self-care.
Thank you. And so then what I'd like to do is, you see before you a diagram, and I think that understanding this concept of egocentricity which is what we have to do first before we can figure out how it's affecting someone else or ourselves. We've got to explore this concept, and that's our primary goal here. So in doing so, I think it's most useful to think of this in terms of diagrams. And so you see here, if we could look at the human mind, we can look at it this way, that it is, everyone's human mind is naturally egocentric and sociocentric, and I'm going to unpack both of these a bit. We naturally develop some intellectual skills as we go through life. That's clear. Everyone develops some intellectual skills. Everyone develops some as they are influenced by people, as they just naturally develop and relate with the world. But if we want to develop intellectual virtues, this will require active cultivation. Now I'm looking at the part here on the right. And this also entails becoming more sensitive to ethical issues and more aware of when ethics is relevant. And the mind also requires us to develop many intellectual skills. So we don't naturally, all of us, develop all of the intellectual skills that we need to function in the complex world that we created as humans. And we certainly fail in terms of our ethical obligations in many ways, and all of us can think of examples of how we do that. So just now think of some of those examples as I let's say when I introduce you to a concept, when I make a point, when I make a statement about a concept, and then I want you to ask yourself, well, could I myself think of an example to support what she's saying? If I can't, then I either don't understand it or there's something wrong with the way she's conceptualizing it. But if you can think of examples of what I'm saying as I'm talking about these concepts, then as it were, you're proving the value in the concept. So if you can think of situations that humans create that are unethical, then you've proven that humans are in many ways unethical. And so we know this is true. The question is, one of the questions is why, and another question is what can we do about it? And there are many others. So we're situated in this larger structure when we talk about the problem of egocentric thinking. And now, when those of you who are studying critical thinking know that we can use tools of criticality to develop many of these intellectual skills that we need. And we can do this through understanding the elements of our reasoning and applying the standards, intellectual standards to those elements. So we know we think with a purpose, we ask questions, we use information, we make inferences based on the information and the assumptions that are leading us there. The assumptions are connected to our concepts, all of which is situated within a point of view, and all of which leads to implications and consequences. I just went through the elements of reasoning. So we study the elements of reasoning, we teach the elements of reasoning, and then we teach intellectual standards. So we want students to be clear, accurate, relevant, broad, deep, sufficient, fair-minded, or fair, logical, and so forth. So notice this all makes sense. But one question is, why isn't it easier to do that? Why is it so difficult to teach people to use the elements and the standards at a high level across the domains of their lives? Well, one of the main barriers is the barrier of egocentric thinking. So we can't, in other words, we can't study critical thinking without also studying its barriers. And one of them, again, being egocentric thinking. Now, let's move forward, and I'm going to unpack this concept of egocentric thinking a bit in the sort of first layers, and then relate this to sociocentric thinking and their opposite, rational thinking. So what we are trying to achieve as thinkers is the highest levels of rationality, or if you don't like the term rationality, reasonability. So we want to be highly reasonable persons. You see that on the bottom. You see the puzzle pieces on the bottom here. When we are thinking reasonably, rationally, and ethically, we are striving to consider the rights and needs of others, and we want to see things as they are. We want to see things as they actually exist in life. We don't want to be distorting things. We don't want to be believing things that are distorted that other people tell us. We want to know what is actually going on in every situation that we're in. We're not afraid to know the truth. We face the truth. We go forward to the truth, even if we don't like it, and even if we have to change, and even if we have to admit that we've been wrong for the whole of our lives. So this is what we're striving for. And of course, this is going to entail intellectual virtues, intellectual empathy, intellectual humility, intellectual integrity, the more tools of criticality. And on the left, again, we're striving to consider the rights and needs of others. This is the ethical dimension. So we're doing both. We're wanting to see things as they are, and we're considering the rights and needs of others while we are also pursuing our own rights and needs, so to speak. We're pursuing our own development. We are growing and learning, and we are doing all that we can to improve ourselves and to contribute to the world. And that again includes the ethical dimension. But we're not stepping on others to develop. We're not destroying other people to develop. Right? We are considering everyone else's rights and needs alongside our own, equal to our own in value. And now this is not the natural state of the human mind. So why not? What keeps us, what holds us back? Well, one of the main barriers, again, that we're focusing on tonight is the barrier of egocentric thinking. What do we mean by that? Well, let's start looking at the parallels here. If rational thinking is concerned to consider the rights and needs of others, the egocentric self is doing the opposite. It's wanting to just advance its own interest without regard to the rights and needs of others. That's the side of us that is selfish. That's easy to exemplify in human life, is it not? Can you think of a selfish person? You'll probably not be naming yourself, but in any case, you can think of a selfish person. You can think of many selfish people. You can think of many selfish acts. So this is highly visible with children, and yet and adults do the same kind of thing, so to speak, but we hide it. We are good at self-deception. We use the defense mechanisms like rationalization, stereotyping, overgeneralizing, projecting. All right, so these are the mechanisms that we use to tell ourselves that we're always correct, which is the other main dimension in egocentric thinking, striving to validate your current way of thinking. So you can have someone who, let's say, you may know someone who is a very kind and giving and, as it were, unselfish person. But that person may still be highly egocentric if he or she is locked within narrow viewpoints, let's say in other situations. So none of us are exempt from these problems of egocentric and sociocentric thinking. We're all found guilty. It's just a matter of degree and a matter of to what extent are you going to command your own egocentric and sociocentric thinking? To what degree are you going to say, that's not the kind of person I want to be? So we have these parallels. And then let's move to sociocentric thinking. We're going to come back to egocentric thinking. But I think we need to, for me, understand egocentric thinking in relationship with its own, let's say, twin barrier, which is, notice again the parallels. So if egocentric thinking is trying to get what it wants for itself individually, sociocentric thinking is merely trying to get what the group wants, more for the group. That's a first way in. There are many complications in all of these concepts, but this is a starting place. And then if egocentric thinking is locked within its narrow viewpoints, well, sociocentric thinking is locked within its group viewpoints, right? So we have, so all of us, again, fall prey to these problems. All of us are sometimes selfish, sometimes validating our way of thinking when it doesn't make any sense to. And all of us are wanting more for our group than we want for other groups at times. We're not aware that we're doing this, but we are. More for my family, more for my little team, more for us, more for our country. And some countries are more guilty than others in this regard. So more for us, whatever us means. And then all of us want to be validated by others, which is a big problem in human life. The so-called need to be validated. This is striving to validate the group's way of thinking, being part of the group. You see, I've got to be part of some group to feel okay myself. This is very common in human life. So you see, we have a lot to learn here if we're going to take these seriously. So now let's move forward and just a little bit in terms of this overview. So again, the human mind then has rational capacities here, you see on the left. And these are, we all have the capacity toward fair-mindedness, considering the rights and needs of others, developing the ethical side. And we all have large undeveloped capacities to develop in so many directions as unique individuals. Now, this is not something that human societies tend to encourage, human individual development. We're also supposed to be part of the crowd. When we look at schools, what do schools do? They have students in lines, in circles, in rows. There are rules, and sometimes those rules go too far and violate the rights of the individual. So all of us have to, I think, fight for our right to develop as rational persons and as creative individuals. And we have to create our destiny on our own and on our own terms, insofar as we can, in a highly pathological human society that we've created, is thinking globally. So now this part of the human mind, insofar as we're developing, is functioning largely at the conscious level, but a lot of it can also be at the unconscious level. Over here, the opposites. These are intrinsic, irrational propensities, again, that all of us have. And I've already mentioned this, but we're just looking at this in a slightly different way. So if this is what we're striving toward, developing our rational capacities and our creative capacities, we've got to get command of these irrational orientations or propensities that we have. So take a person who is highly egocentric in this way, that whenever, let's say, she gets upset, she throws a big fit. This is an adult person, and everybody in the family knows that if you cross this person is just going to have a meltdown every time. And then that person is self-validating, you see, saying in her mind that she's perfectly justified in these meltdowns because everybody's always been so unfair to her. And this is how the world has always appeared. So this person is getting some, you could say, satisfaction out of validating herself in these ways. But she's also, as it were, victimizing herself, because nobody in the family wants to be around her. And maybe she loses job after job after job because she does the same thing at work, or maybe not. Maybe she's in command at work because she knows she can't get away with it. But at home, it's all of this negativity. It's all this polluting of the atmosphere with your words. So what I'm saying is, this is one of many examples of egocentric thinking that hopefully resonate, so you can see how the person gets locked into this narrow form of thinking, the self-validating way of thinking. And as it were, this causes a self-destructive process in this case. Now, people can also be highly selfish and self-validating and highly successful at that. They can go their entire lives basically controlling other people, manipulating other people, and get away with it. But sometimes they don't get away with it. Like someone like Madoff, the guy who made off with all of the money. That's why it's easy to remember his name. And so he had this very complex Ponzi scheme, and there was one guy that was on to him early on, but he had everyone else fooled. And that went on and on and on, and people lost lots and lots of money, and the economy is affected, and in his mind the entire time he's self-validating, you see, and he's laughing at everyone, but he's also a little bit afraid because he knows that the bubble could burst. So you see, there's also a price to pay for that kind of behavior. You see, you can on the surface be feeling good, looking like you're feeling good, and maybe you are, maybe it's hidden so deeply in your unconscious mind that you're just footloose and fancy free. But maybe not. Maybe at the back of your mind you're thinking, this thing collapse any minute, and then my life would pretty much be destroyed. And in his case, his whole family's life, his immediate family's life was destroyed. So not to mention all the other people affected. So again, these are examples of egocentric thinking. And again, to come back to this, notice again the parallels with sociocentric thinking. If egocentric thinking is selfish, sociocentric thinking is groupish, group selfishness within the group, you see? And then group validating. Again, we've covered that. We've talked about that a bit. So what I want you to note here is that all of these tendencies, and this is just the first glance at them. Of course, there are many complexities again in all of these concepts. All of these are functioning largely at the unconscious level. So Madoff was his faulty thinking he was keeping at the unconscious level. But again, I think it has a tendency to creep up into the conscious level, and you have to slap it back down. At least if you have a conscience, so to speak. If you tend to be, you want to be an ethical person, then this is going to be more likely. If you have no ethical values, then you won't have the conflict. All right, so this, by the way, is a good place to talk about cognitive dissonance a bit, because you see, cognitive dissonance often comes in where it always comes in where there's some kind of conflict within the mind. So the mind is in conflict. So it has some seconds or minutes where it's facing this conflict, but it very quickly decides in many cases on one or the other. And often it's the selfish side. And when that happens, the mind deceives itself into telling itself it's perfectly correct. It gives itself all kinds of reasons why. Let's say if you are, why it's correct. So if you see a plate with your favorite chocolate cake on it, and there's one big piece left and there's one small piece, and you know that your partner would like to have the large piece, but you eat it anyway. You eat it first, so to speak. And you can say, well, what is the context, Linda? I mean, what did that person have? Did that person have a big piece before? But let's just say, keep it simple here. You ate the piece of chocolate cake. And as soon as you did, you rationalized why you did it. You didn't cut part of it off to give to the other person. You just, like, I wanted it, I had it, I got it. And when I do that, I say, well, I don't do this very often, or, I was really super hungry this time. And I know that, she or he wouldn't really mind. And, those are some moves that we make when we're deceiving ourselves. So, again, what I'm trying to point out is the unconscious process occurring here and the defense mechanisms that are involved. Some of them, all of this thinking, the good bad and the ugly, all of it appears to the mind to be rational. So herein lies a big part of the problem. If rational thinking looks rational in my mind, and irrational thinking looks rational in my mind, is there any hope for the human species? And you could ask that, I mean, that's not a rhetorical question. It's at the root of why we can't solve the big problems that we face, this very discussion. So let me make a few more comments about egocentric thinking, and then we'll open up for some questions. Now, this diagram is simply designed to help us see that when we're attempting to see reality, we are not just seeing it through clear lenses, seeing whatever we're looking at through clear lenses. We have these distorting lenses, and there are many others, many possible lenses that are keeping us from seeing what is there before our very eyes. So what are these? Well, I've already talked about egocentric and sociocentric thinking. Generally, we can also talk about fallacies in thinking. Some people enjoy discussing fallacy theory. I don't mind. I don't see it as core to critical thinking, but of course, the mind is engaging in many fallacies, and we could catalog them, and we have cataloged them, and we continue to catalog them ad nauseum. So we are good at fallacious thinking, and we're also pretty good at finding it in other people, but not so good at finding it in ourselves. So that's a natural state of the human mind. So these are distorting. You see selfishness, groupishness, and this leads to prejudice and bias. And again, here are just some of the defense mechanisms: rationalization, projection, stereotyping. There are just so many. So what we want to do is see that to the extent that this is true, how in the world will we proceed? And again, the answer is in understanding all of these distorting variables. That's the only way we can proceed. We have to understand what is causing this. What is this? What are these barriers? Why can't we just think critically about everything? Why is it so difficult? Well, it's so difficult because we have our vested interests involved, and we begin with vested interest as a starting place and selfish interest as egocentric thinkers to the degree that we are. Now, when we are unsuccessful egocentric thinkers, we may experience any number of negative feeling states. Here are some of them. And some of these are also feelings that could come from rational thinking, such as anger. So I'll come back to that. So here's the idea. Remember I was talking about, for example, the woman who has the meltdowns. So this is a woman who is unsuccessful egocentrically. At the moment she's successful because all of the family has to tolerate this nonsense, this bad attitude over and over again. But she ends up being unsuccessful because she, let's say, loses her job. Now, and when she is confronted with any idea that varies from her own, that she's connected to emotionally, she may be highly defensive. And so some of these emotions are really helpful to understand if you want to be in command of your egocentricity. Because here's the thing, if you're going to be, or if I'm going to be in command of my egocentric thinking, I have got to figure out exactly what it is doing in the privacy of my unconscious mind. Because you see, no one else can do that. I mean, I probably can't, but nobody else can, for sure, because nobody else knows what's going on in the privacy of my mind. I'm the only one. So I've got to say, or I've got to figure out, let's see, what's going on? When am I being irrational? And one of the ways to figure out when I'm being irrational is to be aware of my feeling states. So let us say I'm feeling defensive. If I'm feeling defensive, then what is happening in my mind is I'm saying something like this to the other person privately. I have no interest in what you're saying. I'm not listening. I'm offended by what you're saying. I'm angry about whatever I may be thinking, but I'm defending my thoughts from your thoughts. And that's not the same as having a strong disagreement. So when I'm being defensive, I know that something is wrong with my thinking. Because I don't, why am I upset about what this person is saying? I mean, if I think that it is very wrong, I can be upset in a way that may lead me to something positive, but to not be willing to listen and to be getting emotionally, involved in this, you see, that's of no use. So do you see the difference in feeling state in that same situation? So arrogance is another one. When I'm, let's say, I know more, I know I've got everything figured out. I don't need to know anything else. Here are some others. Irritability. Someone may be irritable in a situation, again, sort of related to defensiveness. And somebody may have, on the other side, be apathetic, may feel alienated, indifferent. Now notice that a lot of that's connected to a lot of people today who are feeling a sense of dystopia, like we are headed in the dust as humans, and they're not sure how to even function in human society because of what we're doing and the way they're perceiving it, you see? So but alienation and apathy and indifference will not help us. And they're not helpful emotions. And then resentment is one in which that a lot of people engage in, where they'll have let's say a grudge. Couples do this a lot. They have grudges against one another, intimate couples, people who are married, and one person is, so they sort of score points against one another, and they carry around these resentments, and they harbor them, and they have a right to these resentments, and they intend to hold on to these resentments. But if you're holding on to a resentment, who's hurting? You or the other person? I mean, you may be hurting the other person. I'm sure that there's an element there, but you're also hurting yourself, because you're just allowing yourself to pollute your own mind repeatedly again and again and again. But I have a right to this, but I have a right to this, but I have a right to this again and again and again. Are people who are worrying constantly, just going around and around and around, thinking they're actually solving the problem, but no, they're just down here in the worry room. And so, and then depression is another feeling state that comes from thinking that it's not working for you. The thinking that you're doing is not working for you. So instead of, for me saying irrational or unreasonable, it's not doing the job that you need it to do, or you wouldn't be depressed. If we're talking about garden variety depression, now there are different forms of depression, and sometimes that's connected to grief, and that's another issue. So you have to think of depression in terms of the common everyday types of depression that people can work their way out of using their thinking. So where that's the case, then the person has to find the thinking causing the depression. And it could be, let's say you're trapped in a bad relationship and you're not willing to face it because it's unpleasant. Who wants to face something like that? And you know that maybe there are many good things about the relationship, but part of it is depressing to you. And you're not going to be out of your depression until you deal with the root problems. And maybe, and then there are a lot of other variables related to depression. So, and maybe, for example, you need more exercise, but maybe your ego tells you you don't want to. You don't want to get off the couch, but you need the exercise to deal with your depression. You see? So it goes back again and again and again to your thinking. What is it doing? Where is it dysfunctional? And these feeling states, being aware of your feeling states, and any negative feeling states especially, that will tell you, hey, problem, issue, problem, what is it? Red light, I don't know what's going on here, but there's some kind of negative feeling going on here, and I'm going to run that thinking down that's leading to that feeling. And I'm not moving until I do. See, critical thinking is in many ways so easy, it's hard. Pay attention to what's going on in your mind. Stop running from it. Stop running from the truth that you know. Here's a good activity. At the end of this discussion, take out a sheet of paper and write down the thoughts that immediately come to mind to you that you are running from. It's that simple, but you got to write it down. You may then throw it away or burn it if you don't want anyone to see it, but you've got to deal with those things that you're running from, those thoughts, those ideas, those ways in which you know you need to make amends, those changes you know you've got to make in yourself. What are you running from? So again, your feeling states are a big way into this. Be aware of your feeling states. And then I left anger because anger, you see, can come, and some of the others as well, can come from rational thinking. So you can be rationally angry because you read about some injustice in the newspaper, or you hear about something that is very unfair in your perception, and this angers you. Maybe many people are killed. Maybe other animals are being abused, animals other than humans. Maybe there's anything that just really just makes you angry. Well, the question is not, are you angry? Because that's normal in that case. And actually that may be good, because it may lead you then to some positive activity. So let's say you're rationally angry at something you read about, and then you take some action as a result of it. Maybe you start a new organization, a new nonprofit organization to deal with it. Maybe you connect with somebody who's already trying to deal with that problem. Many people do this sort of thing every day, right? They take their rational anger and they try to bring about good as a result of that. And so this happens when people have successful, let's say, protests, and when they're protesting for rational agendas, then they're taking their anger and doing something with it. So all of these are meant as these feeling states, and any others we can add to this, because there are many, many others we might add. This is just a way in. The main idea, again, is that your feelings are coming and going all day long. You're always in some feeling state. Your feelings will then give you ways into your thinking, and there you will look for your irrational thinking. And then one other primary set of concepts that I want you to think about is that when we are being egocentric and we're striving to get what we want, we tend to use one of two mechanisms, so to speak: domination or submission. So in the first, we are using direct power and control over others. Do what I say or I'll fire you. Do what I say or I'll, you're grounded. Do what I say or whatever. Now, the second, actually, that was not a good example because that's not actually domination. That's more probably a good parent move. But where you're using power over someone irrationally, then this is what we mean by egocentric domination. And so, for example, people in marriages often get into this pattern of one of the members dominates the other. And can be subtle forms of domination, can be manipulation. But for domination to work, egocentric domination to work, you also need egocentric submission. You need an egocentric submitter. So take a marriage where one person is dominating the other and the other one is submitting to that domination in order to keep the peace. Some people are naturally easy to dominate because they kind of are afraid of life. They want someone else to be in charge, and they may be willing to put up with a lot of, as it were, abuse to be taken care of in their thinking. There isn't a sense that they can take care of themselves. These are examples of the phenomena. So, and we see these domination, submission mechanisms playing themselves out all throughout human life in many ways. So think about the office, wherever you work. There are people who are dominators at your office. And there are people who are submitters. Or everyone's rational, fundamentally. I mean, you have to decide. But somebody laughed, so I think you get the idea. So if you can see in meetings where you walk in and there are the dominators and there are the submitters, where are you in that? And if you're a dominator, you need to just stop irrationally controlling other people. And if you're a submitter, you need to speak up. I'm talking about, let's say, in a meeting. In a case where often the submitter is a fearful person and is a person who does not have much confidence in him or herself, does not have a sense of self-efficacy, the sense that I am potent, I'm a potent human being. I have something to say. It may not be right, and I won't just say anything that comes to mind, but I'm going to contribute if I'm here, if I'm participating, if I'm in this room. So if you tend to be fearful, you're going to have to push past that fear. You see, this is again why focus on your emotions is so important. Because suddenly you had this fear, this anxiety. It's all self-induced. And what is the worst that someone could say to you? That was the stupidest thing I have ever heard. And if somebody says that to you, that says a lot more about them than it does about you, so to speak. In other words, the other person is the one with the problem. If somebody is going to be blatantly putting someone down like that in a public space or even a private space, that person is acting in bad faith. And you can decide whether you want to participate in that kind of group or can, depending on how much power this person has. The people who think they're above everyone else, the arrogant person whose nose is just a little higher than everyone else's and just has a little more smarts than everyone else in the room. You know, this is a big problem for human communication. And if you see someone behaving that way, then you should, if it's possible, call them on it. I have more than once said to someone, I hope that I'm wrong, but it seems like you're trying to intimidate me right now. And I'm probably wrong about this. And then you see what they say. And often they'll say, oh, I didn't mean anything. Then you know that they were on their high horse, but they've come down now. Or they make another move that shows me they're still on their high horse, and I'm not interested in talking to someone who thinks they're better than me. I don't care who it is. So you see, you have to have these rational underpinnings that are your starting place. And one of them is that you are going to be you're going to be a rational agent in the world. And that means you're not going to be submitting irrationally to someone else, and you're not going to be dominating someone else and thinking you're better than them or controlling them and not allowing them to therefore have their rights and needs and desires be considered. So you see, there is a lot in this theory. And this is a starting place, but I'm going to now wrap this up and then open up for any discussion or questions. So, egocentric thinking occurs in all human minds. We all have tendencies to be locked within our preconceived notions. And this causes us to be prejudiced and biased in many situations. We are also often just simply selfish. And meaning we're placing our desires above the rights and needs of others. And each of us is tasked with understanding what we ourselves are doing with regard to egocentric thinking or rational thinking. But what we do have here, what I've laid out, is a rough sketch of an idea that you see has a lot of power. And you can get a long way with this theory if you will simply use it and make these simple moves over and over again. And let me just say something on the conceptual side. We've been talking about concepts. These are concepts. This is a highly conceptual theory. All of our work is dealing with or includes many interrelated concepts. Therefore, this is not scientific in the purely scientific form, because concepts are not scientific. They have a scientific dimension. And what this means is that we can't study concepts in a neat and tidy way and how they're used in human life. Science can help us uncover many phenomena that we're engaging in, but it won't give us an organized system of understandings for entering our thinking. Here we have a systematic set of understandings for entering our thinking. And one example of what I'm talking about is, take the concept of cognitive bias. Now that is now hot in pop psychology. It's the big new thing from psychology that we're all engaged in cognitive bias. And of course, yes, hallelujah, thank you. That's right, we do. But notice that cognitive bias is only a narrow part of what I've been talking about in this discussion. It's one part of understanding the human mind. And it comes from the fact that we begin with assumptions, and we are often coming from our egocentric point of view based in our prejudices. And of course, we're biased. And you can add cognitively if you like. We're biased. I'm biased in terms of what the world can give me. When I wake up in the morning, it's, well, how can you, the world, serve me? I mean, I can see it in my thinking. It's there. You know, what is good for me? So that's well and good, as long as we're also saying, and what is good for everyone else? What is good for the planet? What is good for the other animals? And so now you see there are many examples we can add, and I'm going to stop there, but hopefully you get a sense of egocentric thinking, or better sense of it, and how you can intervene in it, how you can begin to see your egocentricity more often. And let me just say this, the main way that you're going to see your egocentric thinking operating is if you have the will to see it, because you already have the way. The way is to stop right then and ask yourself, what am I thinking? And say it out loud, not in the privacy of your egocentric mind, which is always telling you that you're correct. You have to get it out. You can write it down, you can say it out loud, you can say it to another person, but you've got to get it out of your unconscious mind. And egocentric thinking cannot stand the light of day. So as soon as you say it, then you have it. Okay, so let me see. I have some questions here. If you could chat in your questions, that might help. The diagrams that I've been showing you are in the Center for Critical Thinking community online. So if you remember, you'll see these in the, you'll see them in the library of publications for everyone. Oh, you don't see my screen. Let me show you. If you're a member of the community, you will see, and that is the guide. Thank you, Jim, for holding that up. If you are in the community and you're at the blue menu, library of publications for everyone, go down to the human mind, which is the third thinker's guide down. And then, actually, this is the cover. You can also purchase this from Roman and Littlefield. If you want to go further in the theory that we've been talking about and get into sociocentric thinking, I recommend Liberating the Mind, Overcoming Sociocentric Thought and Egocentric Tendencies. And you can get that at Amazon or through Roman and Littlefield. And then if you're a member of the community, you can also go to the academy where we have activities. Go to the wall of barriers at the very bottom and come over. And now at the beginning, you're going to see some of the theory I've been discussing. There are references to further readings and videos, and you can do any of these activities. For example, to what extent are you egocentrically dominating? So do the activity. I tend to be egocentrically dominating or controlling in the following types of situations. Some examples of my irrational, dominating, or controlling behavior are: I'm usually successfully or unsuccessfully able to irrationally dominate others when I try, because see how it brings up your nonsense thinking, your distorted thinking, your self-centered thinking. My dominating or controlling behavior creates problems because, and of course, you can print, share, and save, and then you can do the same for being egocentric submissiveness. And then over here, you can do activities focusing on sociocentric thinking. So those are some resources for you. And let's see. I'm having trouble following this complicated issue from L.M. Carter. Let me come back to that, or let's see, take the next one. It is the main purpose today to develop a better understanding of our potential biases, egocentric and sociocentric, for the individual decisions we might make. Yes, the answer is yes. In a group setting, how can the dynamic change if a clear purpose direction is established? I'm trying to develop a clear shared purpose for an organization I've created and think your model may have some hints for how I should lead better. All right, so if you're in a group situation and you are trying to bring critical thinking into that process, egocentric and sociocentric, the concepts of egocentric and sociocentric thinking need to be understood by the people in the group. But let us assume that you are working with people who are highly rational persons. Then I'm going to the library for everyone. I'm going to the top miniature guide to critical thinking concepts and tools. And I want to just point out that in this case, for example, you are wanting to focus on the elements of reasoning. What is our purpose? What is our key question? What information do we need? What inferences are we going to make based on the information? What assumptions are driving our thinking? What concepts connected to the assumptions, again, connected to the point of view? And where is all this thinking leading? What are the implications and consequences? So this is a starting place for thinking about how to bring this model into the workplace. And then, of course, we need to be adhering to universal intellectual standards such as these: clarity, accuracy, precision, and so forth. This theory goes beyond the scope of this particular discussion. But you see, egocentric thinking is important to understand if we're going to be focusing on any of the others, because often people are not clear because they don't want to be clear, because they don't want to hear the other side. They don't want to hear the other argument. That's coming from egocentric thinking. You see? So the violation of the standard of clarity itself can be done by your, let's say, egocentric tendencies. Accuracy is another one. People will say things that make absolutely no sense. You know they're not true, but they're using this information, they're saying it's true, to be forwarding their own agenda. People bring in things that are not relevant in order to, again, get what they want. So we've got to do both, deal with the barriers as well as the tools that move us forward. Perhaps our individual ways of looking at the world around us have a foundation or roots outside of ourselves. how we react to others, how and why we form those thoughts, the role of family, community, education, religion, etc., that result in egocentric thinking. Yes, so you have, the way that I understand the human mind is that we come to the world with our own unique propensities, as well as shared propensities. So we all have some tendencies toward egocentric and sociocentric thinking. But we all know people who are, let's say, when they were very young children, they were kind and good. And now they're much older and they're still kind and good. So we do come to the world with certain tendencies that we don't choose. And some of that is unique to our own DNA. And again, some of it we share. For example, all the defense mechanisms, we don't learn defense mechanisms. We all automatically engage in defense mechanisms as children. And because that's never really dealt with in most human societies, we just continue doing it. We don't deal with the fact that we're highly self-deceived. We don't discuss that as an open concept. So you're right. There are a lot of group influences on the individual that are going to influence the way we ourselves develop, given our unique orientations. So it doesn't quite get us back to the age-old question of, is it nature or nurture? But in a way it does. The way in which it doesn't is that there are certain capacities that all of us have that we each uniquely have. And we can bend those capacities in multiple directions. But our capacities are going to be set at birth to some degree. And I'll give an obvious example. So for me, I'm a relatively short person. So I was never going to be above a certain height. I was always going to be that. And so I may want to be much taller, but I will never be able to be. Now that's a physical example, but I think to some degree this exists in the human mind. That, for example, if you are a highly selfish person, and you've always been a highly selfish person, then how much work are you going to have to do to become a highly unselfish person? It's entirely possible, but what's the likelihood? If you are a very outgoing person, what is the likelihood that you'll be shy? You'll be shy if you're under very harsh conditions, maybe. But let's say all things being equal, then you see, we all have, again, propensities that we can move in many directions. And though we are born into groups that have massive influence on us, we still have a great capacity to develop as unique individuals. So yes, we are beaten down by society. Humans are good at creating very negative situations. We're good at starting wars. We're good at indoctrinating people. We're good at violating people's rights. We're good at destroying whole groups of people through genocide. We're also good at other beautiful things. But we seem to be naturally on this warlike side and the hate side. the supremacist side, the we are better than you are side. And this again is sociocentric thinking. So often in these groups that are influencing us, there is a lot of sociocentric thinking happening. So we are, as young children, we're soaking up things around us, but we also have our own tendencies that are to some degree affecting how we're being affected by these other groups. You see how complicated it is? And you can tease that apart and tease it apart and tease it apart with scientific experiments all day long. In the end, you're going to come back to the beginning, which is how are you yourself functioning in this highly pathological world? How are you moving around the potholes? Are you making the most of things, or are you self-destructing because of the weight of the ugliness of the world? You see? So it's an individual decision. And yet we do have, we are somewhat under the power of our tendencies that we're born with. So for example, if I want to be a great artist, but I have no capacity towards that, then I may not ever be a great artist. I may be an okay artist. I may sort of like it, but I may not really have the capacity to be a great artist. It could be that I don't have the capacity to be a highly skilled pilot. I don't have any desire to be a pilot. I have never had any desire to be a pilot. And if I had somebody force me to learn to be a pilot, I suppose I could do it if I were forced to, you see, but I don't really have that tendency. So I'm just saying all of us need to reach within ourselves and say, well, what are my capacities? What am I good at? Someone here is very good at music, I know. So that's coming out of you. That's a capacity that you were just born with and you've developed. Now, of course, you can't just be born with it. You must also develop it. And that's the part that people often miss as well. So hopefully that partially answers your question. If you're rational, how could someone seem to be trying to intimidate you? Well, people can try to intimidate you if you're being rational. And the key is to be aware of it. So, and sometimes you can think that someone is trying to intimidate you when they're not. So again, you want to be correct. So if I think I'm being intimidated, if someone is trying to intimidate me, you're right. I'm not going to be intimidated by the person, but I still want to know if they're trying to intimidate me. I mean, are we in good faith or bad faith here between one another? And intimidation is acting in bad faith. So this we want to know. So we can ask, are you trying to intimidate me right now? Hopefully you're not. And somebody says, well, the person says, why did you think that? Well, it was because you said this, and maybe I misinterpreted it. What were you saying? So you're not like trying to bang them on the head with it. You're trying to intimidate me. You're trying to intimidate me. And not that you're saying that, but you're just simply asking the question. Let's move. I'm trying to help you not try to intimidate me right now. That's what I'm trying to help you do by saying this. So I'm giving you the chance for us to work on this together. I'm not trying to accuse you of something. See the difference? So at all times, you've got to stay on the rational path. That's the idea. Does or can the social impact and influence of the capitalist financial system play a role in various degrees depending on the person? Well, all of us are affected by capitalism. I don't know anyone that is not. And all of the anybody that's trying to live, let's say, on the earth in the original way, so to speak, is affected by capitalism. Every human and all the animals are affected by capitalism. How much time, I could ask all of you, how much time do you spend thinking about money in any way, shape, or form, or something that can be got with money, whether you have enough money, or whether you can make ends meet, or whether you can, you see, it's one of the polluting forces of human life, capitalism, because we haven't managed to figure out ways to create capitalist systems that do not violate the rights of most humans and other creatures. If capitalism is going to be the driving force, and it is, we can call it unbridled capitalism. And that's the form that we have. And it's allowed to cause damage across the world. Is there a way, are there ways to create capitalist systems that don't do that? I think there are. I don't think we are thinking seriously about them, but where right now, I think the immediate question is, how does capitalism affect you personally? And that you need to answer. Because if it's a negative force in your life, it needs to be addressed like any other negative force, because it affects your mental well-being. It affects the way you relate to others. It affects your level of happiness. I think I'm going to need to bring this to a close. There are a lot of other questions. I know that we could go on and on. Thank you for all the wonderful comments and for joining. And hopefully you'll be joining our webinars in the future. Keep coming and learning with us. Every time I present this content, I learn something. And every time all of you join again, you're learning something. And now you know your assignment. You're to go take a sheet of paper and write down some thoughts you are running from. Some thoughts you are running from. And you're going to be looking for your emotions as keys to your irrational thinking. Use those two tools and you'll get a lot of mileage. And let us know how you're getting on. Email us your comments on how you are using these strategies. We look forward to those. Thank you, everyone. I'll say good night or good morning, wherever you are in the world.